Good leaders lean on their people. Your people want to be leaned on because that's what they're there for. And so they work hard in order to show you that you can lean on them. You want to lean on them because you may not even know a particular piece of what they're doing. And so it just works. It's a symbiotic relationship. And when it's working right, it's beautiful.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the On the Ball podcast, where we have curious conversation about life, career, spirituality, and anything in between. My name is Annie Toot, a civil engineer turned world traveler, public speaker, trainer, and Toastmasters champion. My goal is to bring you inspirational topics and people that can help you find your own definition of success. When you are ready, it is time to be on the ball. This podcast will be truly inspiring for you and probably for many people you know. So please share the link of the podcast with them. Also, a quick reminder, hit the subscribe and love buttons to get notified about the upcoming episodes. Then share a rating and a review if you like what you are listening to. Today we have a Marine captain as our guest. He has worked at NCIS and has traveled the world to handle negotiations and make the world a better place with his leadership and communication skills. Captain Paul Adams, U.S. Marine Corps, is a leader for about hundreds of people and makes decisions that change lives in instants. He has had multiple deployments through the Asia area of operations, completed diplomatic and special operation mission sets. His greatest passion is to do work that impacts the world and the strategic mission of the United States. This episode is about how to adapt to ever-changing times and find the right leadership style. You should stay with us if you seek some inspiration for the new year and need some insight on how to act in these crazy but unexpectable times. I hope you are excited for today, so let's start with today's episode. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the On the Ball podcast, where our guest is Captain Paul Adams, a leader to so many great soldiers. So it's very nice to see you, Paul. It was about a year ago that we met. It has been a crazy year. I think we can all agree on that. How is everything in Hawaii and how are you doing?
Hey, how are you? So everything in Hawaii, starting with obviously the big elephant in the room, coronavirus. Things are different, definitely different from pre-coronavirus. We're out here as a state trying to do the best that we can with our quarantine protocols and getting the vaccination out to as many people as possible now. But it's a struggle here like it is everywhere else in the States.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine. Has your work changed since coronavirus hit, and how is your leadership style in this moment?
Yeah, so work has definitely changed. Majority of my job is interfacing with our international partners, and that requires a lot of travel. But since coronavirus has peaked, most of our partners are dealing with their own struggles with coronavirus. So what has gone from traditionally us flying out, having meetings or doing face-to-face interactions has become nearly all virtual and emails. So it's changed quite a bit, as well as depending on what partner we have, what international ally, they may or may not even have time to talk about plans for future trainings and those types of things at this moment.
So how did everything change? And was it hard to make negotiations this way, or was it harder at least to get communications through just a virtual way?
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely more challenging. The thing about pre-coronavirus is obviously when we set up a time and we fly out to a country, let's say if a meeting gets pushed back, we just push a flight back and we can stay there for another couple of days to make sure we get face-to-face time with exactly who we need to. Whereas now if we miss a Zoom call, we follow up with an email and hopefully that individual is able to get to it in a timely manner. And sometimes they're not. And the same goes for us. It's not all our partners. We have our own internal things going on with changing of schedules and minimum manning requirements and those types of things. So it's changed quite a bit.
What was the greatest challenge in it?
The greatest challenge is that when you're doing anything with international allies and building partnerships, the greatest challenge is the human aspect of you build those bridges through conversation and being personable with your allies. It's one thing for us to go and say that we're gonna, practice an airborne operation, jumping out of planes, and that's great. But face to face, us knowing who this particular captain or this particular general is and what he does for his country is invaluable, because once we get a face with the person and we get some time with that person, then we're able to, as we say, make the sausage and get real partnership going.
So what techniques did you develop, if any, when negotiating online and actually bringing in these people to get to know their backgrounds and do everything that is needed to done?
So we had to start thinking of it in kind of like simpler terms. As a young Marine officer, when you first come into the Corps, usually you take charge of what we call a platoon. And so with a platoon, you're a lieutenant. It's your first time taking leadership. And we have a very basic tool. It's a get to know me form. And so you send it out to all your Marines, which usually you have about 40 to 60 Marines under your charge as a young officer. And so the Marine will get this form from you. And it's like, what are your hobbies? What are your interests? What are you good at? Strengths and weaknesses. We go pretty deep into those personnel cards. And so as a lieutenant, you get these 40 or so cards back from all your Marines, and you read through them so you can get kind of like a snapshot of who this Marine is. And then over the course of your tour with them, you get to know them personally. So we had to take little elements of that with our international partners. So before we set up a meeting, if you're dealing with a senior leader, then you have a bio requested. You get that bio from his staff. But if you're dealing with an action officer, as we say, kind of like a captain level or another lieutenant or an enlisted member, you send them that short little snapshot, and they tell you like, oh, I'm Captain so-and-so. And, if they may have trained in the U.S. at some point, or they may have taken a vacation here. So you get to know a little bit about them before. So the stuff that would normally come out in normal conversation, now we put it on like a contact card, have that conversation that way.
I see. That's very smart. That's kind of getting to know each other before we actually sit down and do the conversation afterwards. And
right.
Before COVID time, you have taken part in multiple international missions and done quite a few deployments. How was your very first mission? Were you excited, nervous? And what was the situation? What type of leadership style did you have to use at that time?
Oh, so that was absolutely excited. Absolutely excited. I don't think I was nervous at the time because I was probably, as many young Marine officers are, I was supremely confident, probably a little overconfident in our ability and what we were going to do. But my first operation was definitely unique. It was a diplomatic mission, to which I took a team of Marines, about 16 Marines and Navy corpsmen. So Navy corpsmen are our medical professionals. So I took them to our post, and we were allied with the embassy in the country we were working in. And so military and Department of State work together all the time, but our working together is usually an email of, hey, this is what we're doing. We won't get in you guys' way. Please stay out of ours. That's usually how that works. Didn't work that way this time. It was more of a, here's my office now in the embassy. My Marines are working in another post. And I had to go back and forth working a couple days a week in the embassy, a couple days a week with my Marines. So that was unique in a sense of I had to put a lot of trust in a bunch of junior leaders that were my Marines. And so the way I approached that was the Marine Corps, we place a premium on what we call small unit leadership. And so that starts not just from the officer, who's me, the lieutenant or the captain. It starts from the corporal, who is a team leader. So a young junior Marine who's in charge of 3 other Marines to make what we call a fire team. And so usually a fire team, their responsibilities, depending on what specialty we're in, can range from anything such as leading his 4-man team on a mission in a tactical environment, thinking like Iraq or Afghanistan, engaging with the enemy, to leading a section of communications Marines, if they're doing things with signals and those types of things, right? So that's the idea of what a young Marine should be expected to do. So my young Marines were working with a international detainment facility. So international prisoners is what they were working with. And so the Marines were not, they didn't join the Marine Corps as prison guards, right? And it wasn't necessarily think of like go to a jail and have prisoners there. It was a bit unique because there was no actual prison facility. They had the individual and they basically were essentially kind of like bodyguards for this individual. So it's a very unique wrinkle, as we call it. So my Marines were employing all types of different techniques in order to keep themselves mentally engaged, because it could become very boring if you're on an 8-hour shift, just sitting with a guy in one location. So one thing was keeping them mentally engaged. We developed leadership games that we will play.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah. So leadership games, basically. So I would go into like the Marine Corps databases and find different information on different specialties throughout the Marine Corps. And I send that to my Marines at the beginning of each week. And I quiz them on it at the end of each week. And so we do things like, whichever Marine had the highest score might get a day off at the end of the month or something like that.
That's a treat.
Yeah. So we did interesting stuff like that, as well as because of the country we were in was so rich in history. As we mixed the shifts up with the different Marines, we had the opportunity to travel around that country. We flew to a couple different islands and saw like old battle sites from World War II. We did a lot of things to make sure the Marines felt invested in the place that they were in, as well as the mission that they were doing. And it was a lot of fun, as well as it's very different challenging, because while I was doing the things with the different Marines, I was also working as a partner with NCIS. And so that was my first time working investigations. And so while working with NCIS, I learned a million things, some that I probably didn't want to know, but I learned a million different techniques about how to look at crime scenes and how to have conversations with people to ensure that, when you're talking to a suspect, there's always, no one's ever going to come out and say, yes, I did exactly what you're asking.
So what was your favorite technique you learned from them about communication?
Favorite technique about communication was how to steer a conversation in order to see what the person, specifically what they don't say, not necessarily what they do say, so that you can build that information profile. So
how does that work? So how do you pay attention to those small things that they don't say?
It's how you craft your questions. It's specifically how you craft your questions. You want, when you're having a conversation with someone, and this is really true for any conversation, if you want the conversation to continue, you leave things more open-ended, and you kind of give that person enough leeway, to tell you exactly what they want to tell you, which will let you know what they don't want to tell you. So that is, when it comes to doing it for work, a lot easier said than done. It takes a lot of time to get decent at. So my buddies may tell you either I got good at it or some of them will tell you I didn't. Depends on who you ask.
Mm-hmm. And you did mention you had to put quite a large trust in your new Marines. How did you make sure that you can do that you can trust them? Or was it just something that had to come in a way and then it kind of built on it?
So the answer is a little bit of both. The answer is it had to come over time, but in the immediate sense, I let my young Marines know that I'm going to empower them in a way that we would not have the opportunity to empower them if we were just sitting back home doing regular training. And so with young Marines, just like all Marines, Marines want to get the job done and they want to get it done to the best of their ability. So me as the young officer telling them, I'm going to trust you to be as good at your job and as capable as I am at mine was more of a challenge for them. And so just because they wanted to make sure that like, hey, if the sir has trust in us, we're going to knock it out of the park. Trusting in their confidence in their own ability was a way that I could go and be, hundreds of miles away from them at different times and not worry about what's going on.
So was it more like that? I take a step back. I do trust you to do your very best because I know you can kind of mindset.
Absolutely.
And if we take it a step back, what type of leadership styles are there? So this one is more of stepping back and letting your team do what they are the best at. So what other things can be considered when we are thinking about leadership? And how can we figure out what is the best situation? What leadership style fits the best in that situation?
So in that situation, what I found the best thing was what we call refinement. So my Marines would send me a report of what they had done. And I would get that report at the end of each day. And so that team leader, either physically we'd meet at the end of the day, or we would do a phone call. And so as they're telling me the things that they did throughout the course of their shift, we would talk about, why they made certain decisions and refine their judgment each time. And so what that looked like was a lot of me looking at which particular Marine leader that I was dealing with at that time, understanding what their style was and trying to feed their development as a young leader through shaping their judgment and their decision-making skills. And so that required a lot of reading different types of decision-making profiles and then looking at what my Marines were doing and saying, okay, this Marine is this particular type of leader. So if you got a very aggressive, the term we use in the Marine Corps is gung-ho. That means very like motivated and like very spirited, right? Got a very aggressive young Marine who's loud and very big presence and whatnot. It's like, okay, that's great. So you know that if this Marine sees something wrong, he's going to say something immediately, right? Well, if we're having a visit from a very high profile senior officer, and that senior officer says something that's not criminal, not a huge deal, but it's not necessarily right. You don't need the Marine jumping off the top rope, as we say, and be like, hey, sir, you're completely wrong, bro. No, we need a little more tact, right? So that Marine who's already has the confidence to, nip things in the bud, you work on tact with that Marine. Like there's a way to say exactly what you need to say in the moment that you need to say it, but there's a right way and there's a not so good way.
Okay, so can you give examples like what is the right way and what is the not so good way?
So if you're dealing with a senior officer, right? Senior officers were at one point junior officers. And so as a junior officer, they were very technically proficient. And as a senior officer, they moved more into leadership and those types of things. And once someone becomes a colonel or a general, they are a very big personality, but at the same time, they're very experienced and very, very knowledgeable officer, right? So when you're dealing with whatever your particular mission set is and they come and visit you, they haven't done that particular mission every day like you have, right? Mm-hmm. So minute details that you have to know, they don't have to know, right? So they might ask you a question that if you're that young Marine who's doing it every day, it seems like this is a no-brainer. Not a no-brainer, just like if you were going over to that officer's job, who that officer interfaces with like Congress and those types of things, certain things for them is a no-brainer, but it wouldn't be for you. So it's one of those understanding who you're dealing with and where they're coming from so that you can inform them appropriately is what I had to teach a lot of my young Marines, because that's not normal for them to have to interact with such senior officers all the time. But when you're doing a mission that's unique, senior officers want to come out and see so they can take pieces of this works, this doesn't work, and then they can go and craft the policy for the future.
Mm-hmm. So that would be more like being patient and really describing in detail to someone else what they think and do without judging that. Yeah, they don't know. How dare they don't know?
Yeah, absolutely. And the way that the term we use a lot in the Marine Corps is breaking stuff down Barney style.
Okay.
Keeping it as simple as possible without seeming insulting to the other person. Mm-hmm. So
this is one style when someone is aggressive and can say what needs to be said one way or another. But what other leadership styles could be out there?
So you definitely, if you got the one style is a very aggressive leader, you definitely have very laid back leaders as well, right? You have leaders who are very good at empowering their certain individuals and delegating, right? But there's such a thing as over delegation. Mm-hmm. So if you have a team of Marines and one of your young leaders, he has 4 Marines, and let's say he's very good at, okay, this Marine's going to do this portion, that Marine's going to do that portion, that Marine's going to do that portion. Okay, great. So what are you doing while they're doing those things? Mm-hmm. The answer could be that he's going to supervise this element, or the answer could be that he's going to go and help this element do, X, Y, and Z. The answer should not be he's going to go sit down and hang out while they're going and doing all the work, So it's one of those, you have to pick your spots as a young leader. And so for me, with my Marines, I had all types of personalities from, we had 16 different Marines. They were all from, it was 14 different states. We only had 2 guys who were from even the same type of state, so very different backgrounds, very different walks of life that they came in to the Marine Corps from. So it was interesting and great conversations with those guys. I love the first team. I love all the Marines I've served with throughout my time. But that first group of Marines and being in one particular place for 8 months was amazing.
Do you think it was because of the trust that you had to lay on them?
It was because of the trust. It was because of the environment that we were in. And it was just because of the relationships that we built working together. In the military, maybe not necessarily completely unique to us, but what really makes your experience is the people that you get to work with day in and day out, and just the funny situations you find yourselves in, like a tire breaking down in the middle of a jungle and a bunch of monkeys standing and watching while you guys fix it. That's comedy that writes itself.
Yeah, I can picture that. It does sound very, very exciting and interesting. And you did mention different personalities, different backgrounds. Does those have an effect on what type of leader we become at the end?
I think absolutely. Because if you're able to get to know your people and you're able to learn how they think and ask the question of why they may see a situation a certain way, you're able to take different bits and pieces and shape your own leadership profile learning from the experiences and the thought processes of your subordinates. And that makes you that much better. So the next time that you encounter a situation, rather than just going with option A, which is the textbook answer, option B has a combination of option A and C as well. You can only really get to that if you really diversify your thinking.
Mm-hmm. And how can you do that?
So you do that as a young officer. One thing that you understand is you're responsible for everything your unit does and fails to do, right? But just because it's ultimately your call doesn't mean you can't receive input from those who are entrusted to advise you. And not just those who are entrusted to advise you. You may ask the most junior guy, knowing that he's not going to make the decision, but just ask him what he thinks, and he may say something like, hey, sir, I think we're supposed to do this, but if we could do it that way, would that work? And then you can tell them, like, maybe we can't do it exactly that way because of this reason, but I do like that idea. I like where you're going with that. And so the way that we're actually supposed to do it, we can, but we can add or sprinkle a little fairy dust from his idea on it too and make it better.
So what would you say is your favorite type of leadership? Where do you feel the most comfortable? In what style?
I would like to say that I'm a little bit more laid back and able to delegate things, but at the same time, so I guess I'm a hybrid because I'm very aggressive with certain parts of certain elements as well, because I enjoy doing work, doing certain things. And so I'd say I'm more of a hybrid of, I have no issue with delegating elements of a mission set, but at the same time, there's certain pieces that I know, like that is something that I'm going to do very well. So I will take a portion and take care of that piece for the team while they're going out and taking care of the other pieces. And while those things are going on, what comes really great with leadership is time management. Because as the leader, I can't afford to just focus on my task. I have to supervise all the other tasks. So as I'm doing my portion of whatever task that I'm doing, I'm building in time to go back, look at what my guys are doing or my gals, and refine what they're doing as well. So.
And how do you not over supervise someone?
I say experience. Experience, really. In the beginning, as a young officer, I think we all micromanage a little bit too much, because we want it to get done right and we want to get it done. Every young Marine, I'm sure it's the same in the Army and the Navy, but every young officer wants to be the best and make sure that nothing ever goes wrong. Experience lets you know that things are going to go wrong all the time. We say a plan never survives first contact, meaning you build a beautiful plan, you go and draw it in the sandbox, and everyone knows exactly what they're going to do, and it's great, right? And then the moment you get off the plane, someone's ex-Marine left the radio, or ex-Marine, he's supposed to drive the truck and get to this place at that time, right? Well, he gets to the place at that time, but then it turns out he used the wrong map or something silly. Like, it doesn't have to be as extreme, but those are just examples of just funny things I've seen. You get to a place to train with your allies, and we're supposed to train with blanks, blank ammunition, right? Well, unlike the movies, when you shoot a blank round, you don't just have the weapon with nothing at the end. There's an attachment that stops the flash of that round, right? Well, you have to bring that attachment in order to use that attachment. So you travel from one country to another, and then it turns out your allies forgot 100 of these attachments. And now you're like, who in this country would even have this piece of material? How can we get it? And how can we do this in order to start this training by tomorrow so their prime minister can see what he came here to see,
Mhm.
you know?
So
So
how do you handle
yeah.
these unexpected situations, very last minute, being very flexible, I guess? And
Yes, flexible. The Marine Corps, we pride ourselves in improvise, adapt, overcome. That's part of our mantra. So you take that mindset into everything. And so what it usually looks like is, here we are, we have the plan, and everyone knows what we're supposed to do. And then all of a sudden, you know, what is it? That wrinkle comes, and now the plan is essentially shot. It's like, okay, we can't do what we plan to do. And we may have planned it for like the last 6 months, but that's over now. It's like, okay, everyone take 20 seconds to cry inside. And now let's find a and now let's find a solution. It's just you gotta laugh. It's we also call it like embracing the suck. Sometimes it's a crappy situation. You gotta embrace it. Because if you don't embrace it, then you'll just feel ticked off about it. So
mm,
sometimes you got to embrace it so you can laugh at it and come up with a solution.
mm.
That's usually what you got to do, really.
Usually?
It's one of those things, The Marine Corps, we pride ourselves in doing tough things. So the things that usually are introduced as friction points usually make it, you know, something that only us as Marines we like to think can get it done.
Oh, okay, I see.
So
And going back to your own personal leadership style, you said you are kind of a hybrid. What was the greatest lesson then you had to learn to become a great leader? What did you have to overcome and things like that?
see, greatest lesson that I had to learn. Oh, the greatest lesson that I had to learn was that if I trained and equipped my guys properly, and employed them within their capabilities, then the truth of the matter is if I've done my job well in the preparation part, then the plan can work without me completely. Um, and so that allowed me to be able to sit back and watch the entire thing and really see where I absolutely needed to inject in order to fix something or in order to refine something to make it better, rather than it's kind of a forest for the trees analogy. You can't see the entire forest if you're over trying to cut down one particular tree. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's the same thing for a mission. Missions have tons of moving parts. And so as the leader, you usually know all the moving parts, but can you sit back and watch the machine work in order to see that this gear isn't functioning properly? Or are you so close to it that you have no idea what's happening over here? You just know what's
Mm-hmm.
supposed to happen. Um, and so for me, and this happened through repetition and just experience over time, being able to say, okay, we made sure that everyone knows how to do A, B, and C, and even all the way down to Z if something were to happen. And so now that I know my team knows what they're doing, I can sit back and say, okay, these guys are doing this piece. It's working really well. It looks like what we're doing here is working, but it's not optimal efficiency. So let's adjust.
Mm-hmm. I see. And do you ever doubt your leadership style? Is there any moment that you're like, did I make the right decision?
Yeah, I think everyone doubts decisions, especially post mission when it's completely done, and you're able to sit back and we do what we call after action reports, right? And so like, here's what we were trying to do, here's what happened, and here's what we did about it, type of deal, right? And so when you sit back and you write out like this was the plan initially, and then on this day this happened, on that day this happened, on this day, and you summarize, especially if you're talking something like a 3, 6, or 8 month deployment, you're going to find that there are tons of things that you guys did maybe not wrong, but just didn't do great, And so then as you're sitting there with that, you're pulling out, okay, we can do this better this time. And the question is, why didn't we know that? What could we have done to know that ahead of time? So absolutely, doubt comes in, you second guess things and whatnot. But one more analogy, and it's not necessarily actually about firing weapons, even though as Marines, we love weapons. But once the round is downrange, there's nothing you can do about it. And so once you've made a decision, stick with it, push that decision through until you get to the friction point where you need to adjust fire, as we say. And that gives you a peace of mind of, okay, got it. We were supposed to be at this place and do this particular action at this time. Well, we got there and we could not do that because of this, but we did this instead. So we don't worry about what we were supposed to do anymore because we're already doing something else. It's one of those things.
When do we know that we have reached that friction point where we need to adjust? And when should we continue pushing forward because that was the decision?
Usually, you've reached that friction point when what you set out to do there's a point where it becomes just untenable. If you get to the point where you're doing more standing around asking, why isn't this working? You've already reached that point of you need to be doing something else. Once you feel that your efficiency is dropped below an acceptable level, that's when you need to be pushing towards another solution. And that might include half the team working on that new solution while half the team continues to do what they can. Or it might include completely divesting from that. And if you've done your planning properly, you should at least know what kind of friction point you're going to reach. And so you should have some kind of contingency already built into the planning process. Now, if something super crazy like aliens pop out of the sky happens, then it might take you a little longer to come up with a new solution. But if it's something like a convoy operation, you should already have, we're going to go from point A to point B. Well, we should know every road that takes us from point A to point B. And so if road A, the bridge doesn't exist, then obviously we're not going on road A anymore. It's that type of thing.
And what are your greatest fears as a leader? And what defines a good leader in your definition?
See, well, that's a good one. Greatest fear as a leader. For me particularly, the greatest fear as a leader is, and this may be a uniquely Marine or military thing, but the greatest fear as a leader is to make a decision that costs someone their life, and then find out that it was completely the wrong decision. That's the greatest fear. Because ultimately in our profession, our resources are human lives. Our greatest asset that we have are our people. Our people do incredible things and they are our greatest asset. But at the same time, in our line of work, what we put at risk is our people's lives. So greatest fear as a leader is making a wrong decision or an uninformed decision that puts someone's life unnecessarily at risk.
And how do you ensure that you make the best decision as you can?
By taking as much information in as you can in that time or before that time, making the proper preparations, equipping your unit and team with everything that's available to them on the front end. So when you actually get to the mission, you have what you need. And then making sound judgment calls based in experience and information that you have at the time.
I see. That's interesting. And according to you, what defines a good leader? So what does a leader has to do to be a great leader?
A good leader has to motivate his or her people to make them want to do things. Not so a good leader doesn't point and tell people you do this, you do that. A good leader comes into the room and guys are like, hey, I can get this piece done. I can get that piece done. Like people want to work with and for you when you're a good leader. It's not necessarily about like, I'm in charge. So by the authority that's been given to me, you go and do this. It's more of I'm the person who's in charge, but you guys know that anything that I would have you do is something that I would do myself. It's something that I can do myself. Anything that I have you guys do is contributing to the greater goal. And you guys understand that I have your best interest in mind as well as the rest of the unit. So good leaders make people want to do stuff. They inspire people to do things rather than just tell them to do things.
And what happens when you need to delegate something that you are not the best at or you are not really able to do? So how does that work then?
So that works when a good example in a Marine Corps platoon, that element that I spoke to you about earlier, that usually has about 40 to potentially 60 Marines, right? So depending on what your particular trained specialty is as a Marine officer, if you're a communications officer, your Marines may know how to work with certain radios. They may know how to work with certain computers and certain satellites, right? You may know a little bit about all those things, but not nearly as much as they do about any of those things. And so you lean on those guys' experience. They're very technically sound, and you let them know like, hey, you're amazing at this piece or whatnot. I'm okay at this piece. And that's great because I'm going to lean on you as my advisor for anything I need to know about this piece, which once again empowers your young guys or gals. And then they feel, hey, if the captain's leaning on me, I'm going to get this done. And I'm going to get it done to the point where they're impressed or where they know that they can count on me. And it's a kind of like a self-feeding organism, Good leaders lean on their people. Your people want to be leaned on because that's what they're there for. And so they work hard in order to show you that you can lean on them. You want to lean on them because you may not even know a particular piece of what they're doing. And so it just works. It's a symbiotic relationship. And when it's working right, it's beautiful.
And I think there is no leader without a team as well. So sometimes we do need to give criticism or get feedback from our team. How does that work? So what is the best way for a leader to give feedback? Could it be either positive or negative?
So praise in public, reprimand in private is one thing that has worked very well for me. You never want to berate or criticize someone out in front of the entire unit. Doesn't work out very well, especially if that person's a good worker. Then all the good stuff they've done, they're like, why is so-and-so going at me in front of everybody? Like I've done a million great things. I messed up one time. Like you don't want to create those types of situations. So constructive criticism is always best received. You're doing something as a team and there's an element that needs to be worked on, especially if you're in training. After that's done, you pull each of your Marines aside. Hey, here's what you did good. Here's what you did okay. Here's what you need to work on, and here's why. And you can do those things face to face, and it works. I found that it works very well when you tell people, here's what was good, here's what was okay, here's what was bad. And you don't always need to go with here's what was good. Sometimes what was good is understood. Here's what we need to work on. If we're working towards a common goal, I find that people are professional enough to understand, like, it's nothing personal, but this piece of the operation has to be good or else this piece will fall off. And so I need you to do this piece. And I know you're capable of it type of deal. So.
Yeah. Okay. That makes total sense. And you did mention when we talked before, when I asked you before, that your greatest struggle was to transition from conventional to special operations. Why was that so challenging and how did you overcome it?
So it's challenging because it is super similar and at the same time super different, which is what makes it hard. Um, you know, special operations and conventional military operations are still both military operations. And so by that token, you either think that, oh, okay, I get it. I know exactly what's going on here. You either have that mindset coming in, or you're like, okay, we're so similar. What's actually different? And so you miss the point of what is the difference between special operations and conventional. So for me, I did not know exactly what the what the very specific differences were. So when I came into a new unit, and now there's entirely new terminology. Just the military, we love acronyms. There's a million acronyms for a million different things. Um, we have books for our acronyms. So you join a unit, you get a
Really?
little book, tells you all the acronyms. So that way in the meeting, when no one's looking, you can flip through your little book and say, oh, okay, I know what that means. you know. But you go over to the special operations, they have the exact same acronyms, but it means something different.
Oh.
And so so we have what we call information fratricide. Like you're beating me up with info that I don't get because you're using all these acronyms and like what I think you're talking about, because for us, that means the chow hall. For you, it means something entirely different. Like we're not talking about food right now.
Yeah.
so so it took time. It took time to be able to sit back and see like what are all the moving parts here, and then I was able to see like, okay, this is why this is different. This is why that piece is different. Special operations, you are able to use a lot of unique flexibility to do things. But that doesn't mean, of course, that in the regular or conventional Marine Corps, you don't have flexibility there. Like flexibility is something that's critical in all phases of military operations. So like just knowing that you got to be flexible here and you got to be flexible there. So what's the difference? That is what was difficult to grasp, at least the first couple months. Once you get working and you start seeing like, okay, I'm doing this piece and my buddy is doing that piece. Okay, I see why. Once you start getting into the groove, then it starts to go quick, because as a Marine officer, like you understand the military. And so employ people within their capabilities makes sense no matter where you're doing it. And so special operations does exactly that. And so does the Marine Corps. It's just those capabilities are different. One's not better or worse. They're just different. So
It kind of was a changing environment all the time. How did you adapt to that? What would be the best leadership style in changing situations?
um, the best leadership style is one of, you have to be humble and understand that you don't know what you don't know. And the things that you do know can always be refined. Um, Good leaders realize that they're always learning. Um, and so if you approach situations with, I know enough to be dangerous in many situations, but I can always learn some more, then I think that sets you up for any environment. Um, if you're able to put your ego aside a bit and understand that you can always learn and be better at something, then you're always able to pull in new tools. People are always able to teach you something, and that makes you just that much better as you continue going forward.
So it's more to be growth-minded and open-minded to new situations and possibilities, if I understand it well.
Absolutely.
Makes also sense. And as I mentioned before, there is no team without a leader and there is no leader without a team. So what is it that you need from your team? What would make like an essential team member in your, like, do you need to choose them and how does it work?
Um, So an essential team member
Yeah.
has confidence and competence, and
Mm-hmm.
they need them both in spades. Um, you need them both. I have seen some very confident individuals who are not as competent. That's
Mm-hmm.
a dangerous mix. I've seen
Okay.
very competent I've seen very competent individuals who didn't have confidence. That too is a dangerous mix. So you're going to find that when you're looking at and evaluating most people, they have they have both. It's just a matter of what does their chart look like. Is
Mm-hmm.
this very confident Marine who could be more competent? This is a very competent Marine who could be more confident. And once you see, and through working with that person, through having conversations with that person, once you see what their mix is, then you can figure out exactly how much you can put on that individual, and what you can expect from that individual, and how you can also help shape their development.
Mm-hmm.
Because for us, the biggest thing is, as a leader, my job is not just to get you to do your job. My job is to develop you so that you can do my job. And I'm developing to do the guy above me's job.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the strongest traits of leadership is developing your subordinates. If you're able to do that, then you're doing it right. If
Very
your
true.
guys are if your guys are only as good as they were when you first got with them, when you leave, you have not done your job.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're better, then by token, I guarantee you will be better as well.
And how do you develop someone's confidence, and how do you develop someone's competence?
So if you have a very competent individual, you can develop their confidence just by showing them, giving them tasks and showing them as they stack their accomplishments, the confidence is going to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone sees that, like, and prime example, when we're training in marksmanship, there's no better feedback than you shoot at a target, you hit the target,
Mm-hmm.
So then you shoot at that target in a shorter time frame. If you can hit the target twice in 10 seconds, you can hit the target twice in 5 seconds, and then maybe in 3 seconds. And as the Marine sees, like, holy crap, I can do this all day and I can consistently do this, confidence is now there.
Mm-hmm.
So they had the ability. Now they have the confidence in the ability, which makes them that much better. On the flip side, if you're trying to develop competence, then you have to take a baseline approach to, okay, what are the building blocks of our specialty, right? And you continuously rehearse and you war game on, if you're going to make this decision, okay, this is your decision. If you were the team leader, why would you be making this decision? And then the Marine talks through, like, I would want to do this because of this reason. And you poke holes in that and you allow them to fill those holes with the information that they have. And so as they continue troubleshooting problems and rehearsing and wargaming, they start to build up their competence of, I do know my job. I know how to do this. I know how to do that. I've learned this. I've learned that. And then their confidence will flow as well.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Without breaking their confidence, of course, right?
Right. And that's
And
part of that. I was going to say, that's part of
yeah.
that. Employ your people within their capabilities. If you got a guy who maybe he's not ready for a top grade level problem, you put someone who is ready for that, and you put the guy who isn't with that guy, so he can see exactly how it works. So there's always ways to develop people.
Mm-hmm. And what is the greatest advice you would give a next generation of leaders when you are teaching the next leaders?
I'd give the next generation of leaders, be diverse in your thinking. Understand that where you come from and what you know before you join whatever organization that you're joining has shaped your perceptions. But your perceptions are just that, they're yours. And other people have different perceptions of how they see things. Me and you may go and see a painting You see one thing, I see another thing. You think one thing, I think another thing. What you think should be valuable to me if we're trying to paint another painting, you know? Uh, so understand that you can learn something from everyone. You can learn things from your subordinates. You can learn things from good leaders, and you can learn things from bad leaders. I think you learn the most from bad leaders because you should be able to learn exactly what you don't want to be or what you don't want to do, which is always more readily apparent in front of you. If you have a bad leader above you and they're putting certain things on you, you can see this is what I don't want to do to my guys. Whereas with good leaders, if you have a great leader who's working above you, it's a lot harder sometimes because they're doing things so well. And you're just like, what is the exact thing that's making this work so well? So understand that you can learn from everyone, and never be too big to accept. Accept advice doesn't mean you have to take it, but you can always accept it. When someone passes a piece of information to you, they're like, oh, well, could we do this? The answer might be no, but the answer also might be, we can't exactly do that, but I do like taking a piece of that and putting it what I was going to do. So, never dismiss anyone just because you think that I'm here and they're there or something like that. You shouldn't have that type of thinking as a leader.
Because we paint the picture together, right?
Exactly.
So that was kind of my last question to you. And now we are leading up to the very last part of this podcast, because I always ask the same questions from everyone. So I have 4 very last closing questions for you. So the first one of that one, what is your definition of success?
Oh, definition of success. My definition of success would be, it would be setting a goal, accomplishing that goal, but experiencing things that make you better along that journey of accomplishing that goal. So like I said, if we had a very basic mission like convoy, go from point A to point B, and we got to point B, but we had to take 7 different routes in order to get to point B because 7 different things happened during that. The experience from those 7 different things is what I will take with me on the next operation. And so to me, that would be successful. In a very outside of military application, I'd say success would be whatever your goals are. If your goal is to get to work in whatever particular position, so you apply, you go, you get that particular position. Success is not getting the position. Success is excelling at the position, learning everything that you can and being the best at what you do. I find that when you're doing something and you're doing it well and you enjoy what you're doing, then that's when life is rewarding. And that's what's successful. That's what success is for me.
I like your definition. My second question to you is, I'm always talking about learning something old every day instead of something new. And I remember when I was staying with you, you had multiple books and you have learned so many different things. So what is your favorite old wisdom or old knowledge that you have learned or read, heard it from someone else? And why was it impactful for you?
That is a hard one. That's a hard one. And it's hard because, like I said, when you're always learning, you're always pulling and picking up certain tidbits from here and tidbits from there. I may read a 400-page book and take only really 2 things that I really, really like from it, right? But I'd say that one of the things that has really helped me that I've found in reading, especially, I've read books about ancient cultures and I've read books about modern cultures. And one of the things that I've found, and I've validated this through all the traveling that I've done, is that people are more alike than we are different. Our circumstances may be very different. Like, The way our governments may work may be very different. The food we eat may be very different. But when you sit down and you have conversations with people, you find out that, okay, aside from the fact that we both put our pants on the same way, like these people want these types of things in their life, just like we want these types of things in our life. And so like there's common ground between all of us. And since we have that common ground, someone like me, whose job is all about friendships and partnerships, essentially, because I approach situations with that, and I validated that through reading all about the world and traveling the world, it just makes it easy and makes it fun, because I go to conversations seeking to, okay, I already know what's different. Like me and you're born in Europe. I'm not. That's a difference, but we're sitting here having a conversation about leadership, which we both believe is a very important aspect in life. That's common ground. Something small, but it's common ground. So
yeah, definitely it is. And my very last question to you is that as a captain, as a leader, you get so many questions daily, hourly. I cannot imagine your mailbox, but there are so many questions that repeat themselves, and I'm sure they ask the same questions over and over again. What is a question, though, that you hardly get asked and you wish you would be asked more often because it would give people the knowledge that is really needed?
Oh, another hard one. See, another question, a question that I didn't really get often, but I do remember the one time I did get it. So, I remember I was a young lieutenant. I was the company executive officer for my unit. So that's the number 2 guy, whatnot. So I had a captain who was above me, and I was the right-hand man, essentially, which he's a good friend of mine. And I'll say, so what that meant was I did everything and he hung out. No, I'm joking. But the question I got that really made me think was one of my young Marines. I gave him a task. He went and he accomplished the task. And he didn't ask why he was doing his particular piece. He asked why I was doing the pieces that I was doing. And like, why was the task given from higher to me to do those things, and the task given to him to do the particular piece that he was doing? He wanted to understand the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
And not a lot of people ask where they're working. Like, people ask, okay, why do I have to do this? But they don't ask for the reason of like, how does what I do contribute to what we're trying to accomplish? And so I thought that was a very valuable question. And we had the opportunity to sit down with a whiteboard and talk about, from our element all the way up to headquarters back in Quantico, like why the Marine Corps does what it does. And it was a great conversation. So that's a question I've remembered.
Yeah, that's a great question, to understand different perspective and understand the big picture. That's really important when we work together with others.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Paul, for your time today. And thank you for sharing all your wisdom on leadership. I am convinced you are a great leader, and you have shared so many valuable insights with us. So I'm truly grateful for our time together. And it was so nice to see you again. It was ages ago when we met and saw each other last time.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. This has been unique. It's been awesome. So thank you. And as a young captain, it's awesome to talk about just my personal leadership thinking and styles or whatnot. Like, not what big Marine Corps is like, this is how we do things. Like, no, this is Paul's take on his slice of the pie. So that was awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you as well. Wow, what an insightful talk. I loved when Paul talked about developing a team and how to increase someone's confidence and competence. What was your favorite take on the episode? Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear it. Also, if you have any questions to me or to Paul, feel free to send me a message on social media. You can find me on Facebook or Instagram, or you can also send me a personalized message to ontheballwithaniku@gmail.com. In the next episode, I will share the answers to all of those questions. If you have a guest suggestion, or if you would like to hear from a specific expert on a specific topic, share that with me as well, and I will do my very best to either invite them or find the right guest for that specific topic. If you found this episode motivating, make sure that you share it with others and text this to your friend right now who you think would be inspired by this story. The best way to live a happy and fulfilled life is to serve others. So share this episode with people you care about. It has no cost, but will elevate them and make their lives even better. If this is your first time here, click that love and subscribe buttons and make sure that you leave a rating and review. I would love to hear your thoughts and feedback on how this message lifted you up, brought you a change into your life. I would also love to hear your own definition of success. I'm so grateful for your support, sending love and great health to you all. And now it is time for you to be on the ball.